Over the repeated objections of defense attorneys, federal prosecutor Dan Shermer told the jury in closing arguments that much of his case against the 6 defendants is undisputed, including clandestine accounts in Rochester, Minnesota banks totaling over $140,000. The government quotes alleged ringleader Leonard Sonny Cragness as being concerned about how to launder drug money and not wanting anyone in his organization to use drugs, just sell them. And the prosecution claims tapes made by a drug runner turned government informant prove at least 2 of the defendants, Dennis Dieters and Jerry Holbrook, quote, were up to their eyeballs in the drug trade.
The question of that nobody's personal names over telephones where the thing will be ruined. The guys going to show up and just open the door and let them look at whatever they want to look. In the meantime, I've cleaned house.
But defense attorney Doug Thompson, who represents Dennis Dieters, charges that the government case amounts to, quote, trying to nail Jell-O to a tree. Because no drugs were ever seized, he told the jury this is a drug case without any drugs. And he charged that the government informant who made the tapes against his client was lying to save his own skin. And lastly, the defense charges that the tapes themselves are counterfeit. Closing arguments from the attorneys for the other defendants will be heard tomorrow before the judge gives final instructions to the jury.
A lot is on the line in this case because if the defendants are found guilty, the jury will then have to decide whether all of the defendants' assets, including an Alaskan gold mine, can be seized by the government as the ill-gotten gains of an international drug ring. At St. Paul Federal Courthouse for the Eyewitness News Update, Tom Garrison reporting.
The defendants are represented by some of the Twin Cities' best-known lawyers, Ron Meshbesher, Doug Thompson, Earl Gray. Leonard Cragness, a pilot and former Spring Grove, Minnesota man, is accused of masterminding a drug ring which allegedly operated throughout the United States, based first in Illinois, then Colorado, then Oklahoma, and finally Arizona. But the ring allegedly also bought or sold cocaine, marijuana, or quaaludes in 8 other states and Canada. The government says another former Minnesotan, Dennis Dieters, is just one of the pilots who used remote American airstrips to smuggle the drugs from Colombia and Mexico. Money from those drug deals, at least $140,000, was allegedly funneled into bank accounts in Rochester, Minnesota. But prosecutors say the defendants made a mistake.
As they travel around the country and the foreign countries, they charge their expenses by credit card. So we were able to follow them around through the credit cards.
But defense attorneys argue the government's case rests too heavily on the word of already admitted drug dealers. Attorney Doug Thompson telling the jury, quote, it is our contention that each and every one of those witnesses has either an axe to grind or they're in this courtroom trying to save their own skin. Prosecutors counter that extensive phone records and government tapes will prove the 6 are guilty.
With all the different lawyers involved and the complex volume of evidence, this trial, which has been months in preparation, is expected to last well into October. At stake for the defendants, if found guilty, is virtually all of their assets. Under a new federal law, those assets could be seized, including a $2 million gold mine in Alaska. At St. Paul Federal Courthouse for the Eyewitness News Update, Tom Garrison reporting.
6 defendants, including 2 former Spring Grove, Minnesota men, are accused of operating a marijuana, cocaine, and quaalude distribution ring throughout the U.S. after allegedly smuggling the drugs into remote American airstrips from Mexico and South America. Close to 16 hours into their deliberations, the jury foreperson sent word to the judge, quote, we have one juror that cannot accept the law the way we were instructed. What do we do? Judge Edward Devitt simply told them to keep deliberating. 30 minutes later, another communication from the jury telling the court the 3-man, 9-woman jury, seen here during a break, is, quote, unable to continue because one juror refuses to vote guilty or not guilty because she disagrees with the law as written and instructed. Then just before lunchtime, Judge Devitt, in a strongly worded letter to the jury, reminded them of their solemn oath and duty to follow the law without regard to their opinion as to the wisdom of the law or feelings as to what the law is or ought to be. Since then, there has been no word from the jury.
No one knows exactly how long the judge will keep the jurors deliberating if they are unable to reach a verdict. There's been a long trial already, and many here think it will be a long while yet before the judge is willing to declare a mistrial based on a hung jury. In St. Paul for the Eyewitness News Update, Tom Garrison reporting.
Just 2 days ago, the federal court jury sent word to the judge they were unable to continue because one juror refused to vote guilty or not guilty on any of the counts. But this morning, after 5 days of deliberations, the 6 defendants listened stoically to the verdicts. The alleged leader of the drug ring, Leonard Sonny Cragness, was found guilty of 7 counts, including trying to import and distribute marijuana, drug racketeering, and obstructing the IRS. But he was found not guilty of cocaine and quaalude charges. 2 of the defendants heard on government undercover tapes also got bad news. Pilot Dennis Dieters was found guilty on all 9 counts. Fellow pilot Gerald Holbrook found guilty of marijuana, cocaine, and quaalude charges, in addition to drug racketeering activity. 2 other defendants were found guilty on some counts, but innocent on other charges. Bond was revoked for all of those convicted. Only defendant Martin Vincent was found not guilty.
Well, there just wasn't nothing there, really. It was a testimony of one person, and that was it. There was no anything concrete besides that. I can get on with my life.
Prosecutors say the split verdicts prove the system works.
These people were able to take their illegal profits and cast themselves as legitimate, successful, upstanding citizens. And the message from this trial is that the government can fight its way through that facade.
Defense lawyers say they will appeal on
a number of grounds. I think prejudicial misconduct by the prosecutor in certain allegations made during the trial and not backed up by evidence.
The jurors were whisked away from the federal courthouse before members could be asked why it took so long to reach their verdict. That's because there's another portion of this trial still to come, in which the government will try to seize the now convicted defendants' assets, including an Alaskan gold mine. In St. Paul, Tom Garrison, Channel 5 Eyewitness News.